Okay, guys, wow, we have a lot to cover in Chapter 6. As you can see by the key terms listed below, oh my goodness, take a look at all of those rates that we're going to be responsible for knowing in Chapter 6. That's why Chapter 6 is its own chapter. So unfortunately, in Chapter 6, we start to undo, and if you've already taken a look at Chapter 6, you know this, we start to undo some of the rules that we've learned up to this point, which can be kind of confusing. So that's another reason why I put Chapter 6 right by itself and make sure that we've got kind of a clear understanding about what's going on here, how these death rates work, what some of these terms mean, etc. So I anticipate lots of different videos for Chapter 6 as we work through the problems and the content. So let's just go ahead and dive in, right? So let's take a look at page 92. So page 92 talks about how death rates have always been important for use in health information and agencies, besides the fact, and we haven't really gotten to mandatory, we haven't talked about mandatory reports and stats. We talked about that in legal. But you guys remember from legal that every instance of death is cataloged. So, of course, beyond that, we're going to calculate some death rates. And so let's just jump right down to the bottom where you see my highlight. Goodness, excuse me. When calculating death rates, the following guidelines should be considered. Because death rates are ordinarily small, calculation is usually carried out to 3 decimal places and rounded down to 2. What that just means is the final answer is usually shown to 2 decimal places. So we're probably going to move away from whole numbers for a little while in this particular chapter. Keep in mind that death is a type of discharge. It's a form of discharge. We called it the ultimate type of discharge in your other chapters. So remember that death is a discharge from the facility. Deaths of newborn inpatients are included in the numerator. All discharges of newborn inpatients must be included in the denominator. Ordinarily, newborns are included in the gross death rate unless the facility chooses to calculate their death rate separately. Now, a special note about newborns. And you've got your first formula on the next page, and hopefully you've already taken a look at that, and it's not, this isn't brand new news to you, but in this particular chapter, you're going to find that we're going to combine adults and children and newborns, which our rules thus far have said do not include those pesky little babies in our adult and children calculations. So we're going to undo that rule in this particular chapter. But if you follow your formulas, like I always say, if you're following those formulas, you're going to be good to go because it's going to tell you what to do. Patients who are dead on arrival, which we've already talked about DOAs, are not included in the gross death rate because they are not admitted to the hospital. And you say, yep, I knew that because we talked about DOAs in a previous chapter. Patients who die in emergency services are not included in the gross death rate because they weren't admitted to the hospital. And if you're like, well, what does that mean? Well, I would say back to you, what is an emergency services or an ER patient? What kind of classification are they? They're outpatients, so that means they're not admitted. Patients who die in the hospital while outpatients are not included in this gross death rate. And so they've talked a lot about the gross death rate, and we're going to hop to that in a minute, but take a look up at the top. We've talked about fetal deaths in a prior chapter already, and so we know that lay folks typically call fetal deaths a stillborn, but what we know is that a fetal death is, we've also been calling it a newborn DOA, right? So it's not going to be admitted to your facility. It's not going to receive any services. All right, well, let's just jump right into our first formula, and that first formula is going to be gross death rate, or in parentheses they have hospital death rate. And I'm going to just flip the page for a minute because over here at the bottom of page 95 we have the net death rate. So gross Gross here doesn't mean icky. It just means we're including everyone. So gross, not used as like icky death rate, but meaning everybody is included. And we'll talk about net in a minute. So if you're still like, I don't understand what you're talking about, think about your paycheck, y'all. You'd love to have your gross, but you actually get your net, right? So your gross pay includes everything before they take out taxes. It's a beautiful number. And then you get down to the net, or what your check is actually written for, what your direct deposit was, and you're like, well, dang, you know, that kind of stinks. I'd rather have the gross amount. So gross means everything. Okie dokie. So your formula says the gross death rate is defined as the number of inpatient deaths for a given period of time divided by the total number of live discharges and deaths for the same period. A synonymous term is hospital death rate. When computing hospital death rates, the concept of the number of occurrences versus the number of times something happened still applies. And, you know, we called that actual over potential in another chapter. So you can think about how many patients were actually admitted to your hospital, right, versus those and died versus the number of discharges, which meant, you know, everybody could have died. That wasn't a very good thought, was it? All right, so let's just flip right on over to 6.1 and just jump right into the formula. So we've got over here, it's going to ask us for the number of inpatient deaths, including newborns. It's reminding us that this is a total, so we need to include the newborns. Those pesky little babies are going to come back, and we're going to work with them this time. Multiplied by 100 over the total number of discharges, and you get a reminder, y'all. How nice is that? Including adult and children and newborn deaths in the same period. And so, again, if you just follow your formulas, they're going to give you a lot of information. All right, so exercise 6.1, we're going to talk about number 1 because you do have these answers in the back and they are written out for you on the odd numbered exercises. So 6.1, using the data below, calculate the gross death rate for community hospital. Deaths are not included in the discharges. Round to 2 decimal places. So hopefully you caught up with that. And you see my 2 little highlights here. They said May here and December here, so that's a textbook error, and we let them know when we find those. So you've got community hospitals data. You've got total adult and children live discharges. This concept is still tripping some of you guys up about when to add deaths back to discharges. And on your Chapter 5 quiz, you might have received an email from me that said, you know, on numbers 9 and 10, you added in the deaths where you didn't need to because the deaths didn't say live discharges. But here's an example of where it does. Total adult and children live discharges, total adult and children death, newborn live discharges, and newborn deaths. And so I've written it out here and we're going to take a look at it. So our formula indicates that we need the total number of inpatient deaths, right? Inpatient deaths, not outpatient, but inpatient, including newborn. So I find 4 adult and children, 1 newborn, add that together, that's 5, multiplied by 100, following the formula, over number of discharges in the same period. But your reminder note says, hey, don't forget, we're doing adult and children and newborn. So on this side, you need the total number of discharges reflected in the bottom. And I have this broken out for you into adult and children and newborn so you can see it. So I grabbed the 645 live discharges, added to it the 4 deaths for adult and children. Then I went and grabbed the 87 live discharges and 1 death for the newborns. You add it all together, you divide, you should get 0.68%. So this first one out of the gate was a pretty good one to show you. It wrapped in there a few rules using live discharges, asking you to go find the deaths to make the total number of discharges. So that one was a pretty good one to get started with. Exercise 6.2 is a little kinder. It gives you all of the information in the table. So let's look at 6.2. The table below is a sample report for a hospital showing the discharges and deaths for the last quarter of the year. Notice that this report lists the patient, discharges, and deaths by physician on the medical staff. Calculate the death rate for each physician and the total for the quarter. Deaths are not included in the discharges. Round to 2 decimal places. Okay, so deaths are not included in the discharges. You've got your physician number. Well, you've got community hospital, October through December, discharges and deaths by primary care physician. So you've got them listed out by physician number, the number of live discharges, and the number of deaths, and it's asking you to calculate the gross death rate. So we're going to look at Dr. 097, and I'm going to try to, actually, you know what? I'm going to grab a sheet of paper. I think that's going to be easier to do than trying to write that small in the book. So your formula asks you for the number of inpatient deaths, including newborns, in a period multiplied by 100. So Dr. 097 has, I'm trying to see if I can get it all in there. There we go. Dr. 097 has 3 deaths. So we're going to take those 3 deaths and multiply by 100. And we're going to put that over, your formula says, the total number of discharges in the same period, reminding us to include adult and children and newborn, right? So all we've got is 1 column of deaths, so we'll just use that. So we've got 12 live plus 3 death for, round to 2 decimal places, 20.00%. So hopefully that's what you got. Okay, let's look at, so this was 097. Let's just go ahead and look at 123. Dr. 123. Just to have another one done, because we've got live discharges, and it's pretty good practice. So I find 4 deaths for Dr. 123. We're going to multiply that by 100 over the total number of discharges. So we've got 204 live discharges plus 4 deaths. So that's how you set it up for 1.92%. So remember we said in the very beginning of the chapter that death rates are normally low? And you're looking at that thinking, I mean, that's a 20% death rate. This is almost 2%, but less than 2%. I mean, so you think about that. Do you want to necessarily go to a hospital where there's a 20% death rate? It's not necessarily what we're saying about Dr. 097. We're not saying he's a bad physician. Dr. 097 may actually treat the sick of the sickest patients, and so that's why that particular physician may have higher death rates. And so when you calculate a death rate, and you come up with something that seems pretty large, it's okay to pause and question that. That is exactly why tables like this exist and why we calculate it, because we want to make sure that, you know, our doctors are possibly on track with the typical number of deaths seen in that kind of service or practice. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to tell you the rest of the answers, okay? So 256, Dr. 256 should be 7.69. All right, maybe I'll write that. Let's see if I get a 7.69. And Dr. 372 should be 4.17. 431 is 4.62. 537 is 2.47. Oh my gosh, y'all. And all these should be percents. Sorry about that. I'm so busy calling out the answers, I forgot to write that down. 638 is 3.60%. 3.41%. 0.99%. 4.82%, and the total is 3.57%. And that'll do it for right now, and I'll be back soon.